So the Mongol Rally has very few rules to it. The guidelines are you do it in a car that is unlikely to make it all the way to Mongolia. Ideally less than 1 litre, two-wheel drive definitely, and the more ridiculous the better. No set route, just get to Mongolia however best you see fit. And with the organisers' strapline for the car being the shitter the better, we decided the Austin Allegro, which has been voted by many motoring magazines as the shittest car ever made, we figured that would put us in good stead. So we shelled out £651 for a 1976 Austin Allegro Estate, and set to planning a route that would take us across 17 countries.
Yeah, 17.
Really putting those other cars to shame, isn't it? How old's your Austin? 38.
The Austin Allegros came in a few different body styles. We went for the two-door estate version, which is quite rare. I think there was only about 7 taxed and running in the UK when we started. There's 6 now. We got it with an MOT off eBay.
Fairly bomb-proof engine, strangely enough. It had the 1500 engine, so almost the sport model.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it didn't have the square steering wheel that they were famous for, but we overlooked that shortcoming.
I think the first night we'd set off, I think we'd been on the road maybe 12-14 hours, got into Belgium, stopped off in Bruges, and then I started driving. It was my first stint in driving, got a crate of beer from a petrol station, and we found out that if you give the crate back you get 14 euros off your next crate of beer.
I decided, I took it upon myself to see if I could drink the beer faster than the car could drink the petrol. So I thought, if I can empty this crate before we get to the next petrol station, I'm 14 euros up. So I set to in the back of the car, obviously not driving, trying to do in 24 bottles of beer before the car could be 14 euros.
I think I've been driving about 6 hours, driving down the motorway, and all I hear is just a massive crash, like I thought it was lightning or something, and then these two turn around and go, stop the car, put the fucking car over now. The car that we've been driving with, this Morris Minor team, it was a brother and sister, they'd been smashed into the back of by a Mercedes that had flipped the car over, landed on its roof and was just sliding down the motorway, pissing out petrol everywhere, sparks flying. We all shot ourselves at that point, got out of the car, ran over.
Luckily they'd fit some Recaro racing bucket seats, full-length bucket seats. So as the car had flipped over onto its roof, the roof had collapsed, but luckily landed on the top of the seat. Without a doubt, if those seats weren't in the car, they'd have been dead.
I think it hit me quite hard as well, because like I said, I've been driving for about 6 hours. That's not that day, that's in total. I passed my driving test to do this, and this is the first time I'd actually driven a car outside of a driving lesson.
Yeah, at night as well, on the wrong side of the road.
And we
with a piss head in the back.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when this happened, I'd actually constructed a mask out of duct tape. So I'd ripped this mask off as we were jumping out of the car. So I was kind of missing bits of eyebrow as well, and I was wearing a string vest at the time as well. But when the police turned up and the ambulance turned up, they could smell the beer on me. The police kind of at first thought that we'd done something stupid, and they were treating us very much as the cause of this accident. Why wouldn't you?
Chance my hand in the red heat. I shake the ground in the red heat. Oh, try to bring me on the insane man. Oh, try to bring me on the insane man. And I just can't stand it, it beats me down.
We are waiting at the Turkish border. The Vespers that we just made friends with are going through the process. No one has been beheaded. So it appears we are in Turkey now.
The land of kebab.
The Turkish do not recognise the Austin Allegro, so we are now driving a Rover Maestro.
Yeah, 1.6.
1.6. So hopefully, if any police decide to scrutinise our documents, basically. While in Istanbul, had to go to the Iranian embassy to get our visa stamps. But the Iranian embassy was closed for a couple of days, so we had 3 days in Istanbul to kill. We ended up in a hostel with 4 or 5 other rally teams. When you've finished a day of 14 hours of driving, you try and stop somewhere that serves beer and drink as much as you can.
Hello, my name is Paul McCartney. I am from Czech Republic, but I live in Istanbul.
We were wondering where you'd got to. So we did that a few nights in a row with the Australians, and they were doing it in a Daihatsu Terios, which was 4-wheel drive, and they were starting to feel a bit kind of like imposters. So they kind of took us under their arm a little bit, and they were like, listen, we'll be your support vehicle. That'll make them feel better about themselves, and it'll make us feel a hell of a lot safer.
They were doing it properly. They brought food to cook in the desert.
They brought enough food to last them the whole rally.
Whereas we kind of did a day's supply at a time.
I think we had a pocket full of pepperamis and some beer.
I don't feel 100% safe around the people that we're going through these borders with at the moment. A little bit because I don't know them, and a little bit because I've never been very, very drunk with them.
Iran was nothing like I expected. The news shows Iran in a certain light that just isn't representative of the Iran that we saw at all. Like, it was, the people were lovely, very helpful. I mean, we broke down on the side of a road. Exhaust falling off. A guy came out with some cream buns for us, and that's how we felt pretty much the whole way through.
They were very, very pleased to see you.
I love you, Iran.
It felt like the people were dying to make sure that you go home and tell everybody how great Iran is.
We may have been stopped by the police.
Hello.
Sorry?
English.
English.
Oh,
Russian.
passport today?
Oh, passport. This is...
Thank you.
فرمون ما ایوره.
Oh, yeah. This is English car.
We thought you were driving without a steering wheel, that's why we... It happens all the time around here.
Have a look at our lovely accommodation for the night. In central Baghdad.
Roll there. All of these doors used to have locks on the outside as well, which means people used to be locked into these rooms.
So that's Iran ticked off. That's in mileage halfway through the rally. Leaving Iran, drove into Turkmenistan. First and foremost is Ashgabat, where we drove in, and it's just this ridiculous palace city. It's like everything's like white marble.
In the middle of the desert.
Yeah, there's nobody there. It's like they've obviously built this to make it look really nice.
No money, no honey, lent us $400 to get out of Iran and into Turkmenistan, and we arranged to meet them at a hotel in the centre of Ashgabat. So we turned up with $400 in cash for them, and that pretty much all went straight back into the bar. So
Mongol Rally, man.
No, it's not.
Swimming pool. Las Vegas. Ashgabat. I've never heard of that city until 3 months ago. I'm really enjoying it right now.
So when we were driving through Turkmenistan, trying to find a place called the Gates to Hell, which is it was a Soviet gas rig, that about 40 years ago had collapsed. It was just in the desert, and the sand underneath it had collapsed, and the whole rig had fallen into the desert. Somebody smart at the time had said, "We'll just burn it off," so they chucked a match into it. And this was 40 years ago. It's still burning.
Just stopped in a town called Bokadak on the way to the gates of hell.
That's it. So we got off in search of this place one night and kind of managed to find it. We found a little kind of off license, and we bought some kind of. At the time, we weren't sure whether we bought pot noodle or gravy granules, but we figured that was going to be our dinner. And if that was going to be our dinner, then we got a stiff drink as well. So we bought some vodka that was called Angry, and it was specifically Angry Special Cock number 3. If you can make this out, at the bottom, we are drinking Industrial Cock number 3. Goodbye.
In Turkmenistan, they get married very early, about 17 or something.
I found it very bizarre that we weren't all married when they asked us
Yeah,
about
they
our wives.
laughed
They're
at us when they found out we weren't
found
married.
it hilarious.
But
Well, left on the shelf.
He ended up taking us to to a mechanic to get a car fixed as well. They gave us a load of egg.
Oh yeah, that was awful. Me and Alistair were left at this mechanic's house. The lady comes over with
They brought like pastries and then
a
I thought, oh,
bowl
that's nice.
full of fried eggs. I'm trying to go through the eggs, and there's just no room in me at all. I've already had my breakfast 5 minutes before, and I was just like, Simon, please come back soon. And luckily, Simon turned back up 20 minutes later after I'd done my best with these eggs. And I just pleaded with him, Simon, please tell them I don't want any more eggs. We have just arrived at the Turkmenistan-Uzbekistan border. I'm having to move very slowly because these Turkmen have filled me up with horrible bread and egg.
Uzbekistan has a really bad petrol problem. You can't seem to get petrol from any petrol station, so you've got to drive around and just ask for benzene.
We'd managed to ask somebody how we get petrol, and he'd kind of driven us around town a little bit and shown us where to find petrol, and it was just somebody's house. So me and Alistair stayed in the car, as good friends do, keeping the car safe. And we just watched as this bull starts going up the road. We were just like, that's going to go right past Simon, and we kind of saw Simon notice this bull and kind of step in, rolling what's going on here. But it was a success. We got enough petrol to get us to the next house that sold petrol.
Uzbekistan.
The busiest place was the motorway. There were people in the median strip down the middle, just hanging out, selling grapes, having a cup of tea,
Watermelons.
watching an ass. An ass race.
That is a fine piece of ass.
Almaty in Kazakhstan, the Grand Bazaar, which we found, we thought it was the car bazaar,
Yeah.
but then we got there and all we could find was like knockoff Nike trainers and knickers. So we had to walk all the way through this place to find the actual car bit.
Which was huge.
Yeah,
it was
huge.
absolutely massive. It was
gorgeous.
The entire thing was huge.
And there's all old shipping containers just plonked down, doors open, just turned into shops, and then you'd buy some tyres. They'd have any size tyre for any type of car, and then the little man will take your tyres off to his little green box.
Yeah.
The guy in this little green container with a window just for a tyre. I don't even know how he gets in there.
Yeah.
And the guys will just feed him the tyres, and he'll do them for you, feed them back out. I had to skip Russia, so I had to leave these two in charge of the car for about a week. Because I'm originally Russian. Because I was 26 at the time of the rally, it would mean that I could be drafted into the army for conscription. Stayed away from Russia for the last 10 years, so I'm going to try it on the last year.
So we just left Simon in Kazakhstan. We are now a two-man team
With one driving license.
and no Russian speaker.
When we got into Mongolia, we discovered that the roads were even worse than we'd been told they were, and so the first day's travel we did a quarter of what we'd planned, so it ended up being a week that it took us to meet back up with Simon, by which point he'd left us with a fairly decent running car. When we saw him again a week later, we'd ripped the petrol tank out on a railroad crossing. The suspension had collapsed. The steering was only really affecting one wheel. The other wheel was close to falling off.
Should have got the insurance.
The brakes have been problematic as well as the clutch, but the car had a habit of kind of repairing some of the smaller problems, and the clutch had started working again. We had a leak. We never identified the leak, but it stopped leaking. Same with the brake system. But yeah, when we met up with Simon again, just outside a city called Altai, was it?
Yeah. Good morning. The car is dead. Just driven about 200 miles on rubbish roads. And this is what it did to the wheel. The battery broke through the brakes just now. It's set on fire. All the electrics are done. So this car is a death trap. The convoy has gone ahead, and we're hoping they will return with a tow truck.
Thankfully, Simon had already scouted it out to find a garage. The suspension on our car had started to come away from the chassis. The wheels, rather than staying rigid, were kind of floating out as we went over bumps, and we managed to overcome that to get to the garage by using ratchet straps to pull the bottom arms of the suspension in. And at this point we were running a petrol tank that was actually a jerry can in the passenger's footwell, supported on a watermelon, with one of our team t-shirts wrapped around a piece of garden hose to give us a nice airtight seal. Simon, who speaks Russian, was able to speak to the mechanic's wife and roughly explain what we needed doing. We pointed out all the points that needed welding, which we figured was going to be probably a day or two's job, because it would have required at least dropping the engine down. Once we'd explained that to him, he said he'd have it done in an hour, which left us wondering what the plan was.
As we walked back to the garage, and we were just going to see how they were doing, the guy sort of chases them down and said, "Oh, we've got your boo dog. Do you want to eat it now?" And we didn't know any what it is, but we heard it was a goat that they open and stick
Open the goat, peel the skin back,
and stick some hot rocks in it, and cook it like from the inside, and apparently it's delicious.
There's a breakdown in communication at some point, and he turned up with a dead marmot in a carrier bag.
Like a furry beaver.
Yeah, it's just like a beaver that carries syphilis.
Yeah. They then set to putting this marmot on top of a steel wheel, and three of the mechanics took out blowtorches and set to it for 15 or 20 minutes, taking extra care to blowtorch the eyes and rear end of this animal. Also turned out that the reason they'd managed to weld our car back together so quickly was that they had completely ignored the points that we'd asked them to weld and just replaced the ratchet straps with iron gate posts. The gate posts were near enough, but we'd like a bit of extra welding in a few places, and they said that will take a few more hours, but we're cooking the marmot anyway, so you might as well stick around. So we set to drinking Mongolian wine, Mongolian vodka, with 3 generations of this family. We ended up spending the night with the mechanics, which was very bizarre.
Playing poker and arm wrestling all night.
Yeah. One of the mechanics showed us his collection of coins that he'd built up from arm wrestling Mongol Rallyers over the years that had turned up. We basically drank until we passed out with this mechanic, and then woke up in the morning, went back to our hotel to collect a few things, came round to collect the car, and at this point the mechanic came and grabbed me and took me by the arm, and everyone was wondering what's going on here, and he kind of walked me over to the local shop, which was basically a cupboard, and ordered a litre bottle of vodka and 2 bottles of what they call Bacchus D, which is effectively like a Red Bull drink. And he said, "One." And necked it, and this was about 9 a.m. I drank the vodka with the mechanic, and he then walked me back out of the shop holding my hand. And these guys are all staring at me like, "What's just gone on in the shop? Why is he holding hands with the mechanic?" And I explained to them that I'd just had half a litre of vodka and I wanted to get into the back of the car for a little while. It wasn't my turn to drive. So when we finally got to Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia, where the finish line is, we'd been driving for the best part of maybe 36 hours at this point or something. We were exhausted and hungry. When we actually got to the finish line, I think it was, a bit of kind of almost disbelief that we were actually there with the car that we'd thought, when we were setting off 6 weeks earlier and the exhaust had fallen off before we got to the start line, and we thought we're not going to get past France in this thing.
Yeah, people were making bets that we'd crack it in like Turkey at the latest possible.
And we'd arrived. We were the 119th car to arrive there. We probably could have got there a bit higher, but because we'd arrived there before the finish line had opened, we left the car there and went to find somewhere where we could have something to eat, something to drink, or have a little bit of quiet time in the bathroom.
We did manage to drive over the finish line, even though the car was, the suspension had collapsed and the wheels were rubbing on the wheel arch. We had no front tyres anyway.
Steering that only really affected one wheel at a time, but there was never really any telling which wheel it was going to affect.
But there was no brakes.
I think the feeling that the finish line was almost a mixture of relief that you'd got there, disbelief that you'd got there in the car we started out in, and a bit of disappointment that you'd got to the end, and the next thing to do was get on a flight home and go back to normal life. So it was a little bit bittersweet, really.
That moment though, finishing and just being stood on the car, celebrating, it was nice.
We did feel like heroes. I felt like a hero for sure.
When you can drive to doorstep of Afghanistan or Syria in 2 weeks, it really brings it home that actually there's roads to these places. It's part of the world, and it sort of gives you a bit more of a worldwide understanding
the world
of
feel a bit more like a community.
I think it does hit home, like seeing how other people live in those sort of countries and how good we have it really here.
You'd see kind of people going into a shop and they'd collect what they wanted and they'd walk out, and you could only assume that there was an understanding that take the bread, come back in a couple of days with some watermelons. You can get watermelons everywhere. Past Turkey, watermelons are pretty much the currency.
You can probably do the rally just on watermelon.
Did take a good few weeks to readjust to the having to do normal life sort of stuff.
Yeah, like shave.
I never quite got that one back. Washing, laundry.
We raised about £3,000 for charity. It's actually worked out a little bit more with gift aid once we paid it.
Spending 12 hours a day entertaining each other in a car, just telling jokes, laughing at anything and everything. The humour gets very childish after a while. It's all farts and sex and